Alright, welcome back to my Drek rewatch. Today we're gonna finally finish up episode 6. I'm a little sad. This is my favorite episode, and this is the last part. I've definitely just let myself have this one. I didn't expect to split it up into 3 separate parts, but since it's my favorite, I thought I would just let myself have it and just let myself talk for a really long time. But this is the last one, I promise. So if you haven't seen the first 2 parts of this episode, I'll put them in the cards so you can catch up, because I definitely will be talking about some of those same themes that I mentioned in those parts in this part as well. And then also, just like in those parts, this is still a pretty heavy episode. I would definitely say this is the most hopeful one, but we're definitely going to be talking about substance abuse. So I will leave resources in the description if you or someone around you needs help. I think that's it. I think that's all I want to say in this intro. Let's finish up episode 6. I kept mentioning in the first 2 parts that I personally like to split up this episode into 3 different levels, and I do consider this one the beginning of the 3rd level, but if you want to go into the semantics, I guess I would probably rather consider this a transitional clip from the 2nd level to the 3rd level, because it definitely starts in a place where Mateo is still really bad. I mean, he's going to his drug dealer to get more drugs to self-medicate. I also was seeing a bunch of posts from when people were watching this live thinking that Mateo was going to get something a lot worse than weed, and they were legitimately really worried. So this definitely starts very dark, and then it ends in a much happier and more hopeful place. I don't know, happier, but definitely hopeful. So I think this is a good transitional clip, but I'm still gonna kind of consider it the 3rd level. Whatever, semantics, doesn't really matter. And I mentioned it at the very end of the last part, but he wastes no time in getting to the dealer. His hours opened at 10, it is now 10:13. There is a definite sense of urgency here. Mateo wants his damn drugs, and he is going to get them. Well, he's gonna get some therapy instead. We stand Reindeer here. I'm gonna call him Reindeer, by the way, also. I'm not gonna try to say his name in German. I'm pretty sure it's Rentier, something like that. I'm gonna call him Reindeer, so just, if it sounds ridiculous, it's because it is, okay? But not any more ridiculous than me trying to say the German word.
Rentier.
Pretend like that's how I said it. So everyone and their fucking mother has talked about the iceberg symbolism in this clip, but just in case somehow you don't know about it, I'm gonna mention it anyway. So on the projection screen, Reindeer is watching, I don't even know what he's watching, some kind of Animal Planet, National Geographic thing, and it's really just this stock footage of an iceberg getting destroyed, kind of like the ice is falling down in droves. As this clip goes on, it's framed in such a way where you can always see it behind Mateo. We're going to see it more when he actually sits down. It's really beautiful framing. I love the way that this scene is framed and lit. I think it's so beautiful and so underrated. I think in general, Drek's cinematography is underrated. That's another rant for another day. So basically that iceberg symbolism is to show that this is the clip where Mateo is finally going to verbalize a little bit of what's going on. He's literally chipping away at that iceberg little by little. And that's why this clip is the marker for a more hopeful beginning for Mateo. The part that I really love about this, I know everyone goes on about the iceberg metaphor, but I really love this. I love how he takes a moment to look not at the projection, not at what is actually being shown. He takes a moment to look at his own shadow that is being cast on the screen. And I think that's so beautiful and so subtle, and it really is just more symbolism of Mateo feeling like a stranger to himself. He's just looking at himself as this silhouette of a person right now. He's still not in a place where he knows who he is and where he is anything less than a stranger to himself. We saw this in the last clip when he was looking at the pictures of himself and was just scoffing at them, what the fuck happened to that kid. And then we also heard it in the second clip when they literally played a song called Stranger. So that's definitely a theme throughout this entire episode, and we see even more visual representation of it here, and I think it's super beautiful. And Mateo also immediately starts playing with the sequin animal head. Is it an animal head? I think it is. I don't know. I'm just gonna call it like a sequin knickknack thing that's on the table. And we've seen him like fiddle with things so many times. We saw him do this with his pen, like literally back in the first clip of this episode. We saw him do it in episode 2 when he was with David. He was just like playing with a cord on the table. We saw him do it with a little plant on his desk in episode 3. We saw him do it with a lane separator in episode 4, and it is also in later episodes as well. This is definitely a very consistent tick. Yeah, so this is what I was talking about, how the shots of Mateo are always framed. He's never in the middle. He's always kind of off to the side, off center, and you can see the huge projection screen behind him. You can always see that iceberg and that ice falling whenever we see Mateo in this scene. Not only is it lit really beautifully as well with the blue, but then like all of the shadows and the red, but it's also framed in a really cool way as well. In a way that never lets us forget that Mateo is going to open up here, that this is the beginning of him finally kind of letting himself feel what he needs to feel. So there they make a point to show us that Mateo is playing with the knick-knack. And this isn't the only time they do it too. They pushed in on it earlier in this episode when he was playing with his pen, and they're going to focus on it later, I think in episode 9, when he plays the inside of his jacket. So this is like a thing, and I wanted us to notice it. Druck wants us to notice that this is something that Mateo does. This is a part of his character. And maybe they were just trying to be consistent and say that Mateo is just like a nervous person. Of course, I'm taking it as evidence for him having some kind of mental illness, probably depression and anxiety, which is also another example of them just like dangling those mental illnesses in front of our faces, but then not really giving us closure. So I don't know if that was a good idea on their part. I just think it's interesting and kind of strange that they would make a point to focus on stuff like this, focus on potential evidence for a mental illness when they knew they weren't really going to do anything with it anyway. Even though it wasn't overt, they still coded it in anyway, with all of these little moments that all add up to some really big stuff, and there's so much evidence. And once again, I'm not sure if them coding it in like that was a good idea or a bad idea, because they should have addressed it. This is scum. I mean, mental illness is kind of a big deal, especially in an Isaac season.
Ich vergraule meine Freunde.
I love that line. I love how it's delivered. I love the wording of it. I love everything about it. I love how he doesn't make eye contact with Reindeer when he says it. I love how his voice sounds higher than normal. It wavers. It definitely wavers. It kind of breaks. And the wording of it. I scare away my friends. This is the first time that Mateo has verbalized what is going on. This entire episode, we've seen him pushing away other people. We've seen him, I think, pushing himself further from himself, if that makes sense. But now, he's finally saying it. He's finally accepting what's happening and talking about it. And the way that he decides to condense everything that's going on is by saying specifically, I scare away my friends. He doesn't mention anything having to do with Dave. He doesn't mention Sarah. For the first time that he verbalizes his situation and his struggle, that is what he focuses on. And I think that's so striking that out of everything, he is focused on the fact that he is pushing his friends away and forcing loneliness upon himself. And it makes sense that that's what he would focus on, because being lonely is what he fears. So when Mateo says, I don't even know, that is when he looks at Reindeer. And I really love that because it shows that that is so honest. He really just doesn't know why he has this urge to isolate himself and why he pushes people away even though he knows that he hates being lonely. It seems like such a huge contradiction to his very being, and yet he does it anyway. I love the way that Reindeer speaks there. It really does sound like a motivational speech. It sounds like it's a soliloquy. It's very theatrical. Okay, I think that closing statement is once again worded very specifically. He says, "Otherwise you'll get lonely, and then other things will become your friends." That is what this clip ends with. That is Reindeer's big closing statement for his production, right? So there's two emphases there. The first emphasis is loneliness. I think it's so important that Reindeer mentions that if Mateo keeps going down this road, he will be lonely. He will be exactly what he fears the most. Although I do think it is a bit irresponsible for Druck to expect us to just kind of drop all of Mateo's obvious deeper issues after this conversation. It is made a little bit more believable by this emphasis on loneliness, I think. I don't think it's completely out of left field for Mateo to really actually try to work harder on himself and to actually build those bridges and take Reindeer's advice, because Reindeer specifically says, you will be lonely if you keep doing this. And that is Mateo's deep-seated fear. He does not want to be lonely. Yeah, he probably also doesn't, want to be a drug addict, but he definitely doesn't want to be lonely, and we know that. It being more believable doesn't make it less irresponsible in my mind, but I just wanted to throw that out there anyway. I think that wording is important. And the second emphasis is that drug abuse. Other things will become your friends. Druck makes a specific emphasis on the possibility that Mateo's drug abuse problem will get worse if he doesn't start opening up to people. In the OG, Isak goes to the doctor to get sleeping pills because he's been struggling with insomnia, right? If you think about it on the very surface level, they're the same situation. Mateo also goes to Reindeer to get pills to sleep. But there is an extremely important difference here, and it's that there is not an overwhelming amount of evidence in the OG that Isak has a deeper mental illness. There's not even an overwhelming amount of evidence that shows that he uses weed to cope. In the very first clip, we see Isak smoking weed with the guys in the bathtub, and it really just seems like he's smoking weed recreationally. He's doing it because his friends are doing it and whatever, it's a party. But we don't really see him doing it alone too much, and we definitely don't see him doing it in every single clip in episode 6 before he goes to the doctor. Mateo, on the other hand, in the very first clip, we see him also smoking weed with the guys in the bathtub. But the camera makes sure, and Mickey makes sure, to focus on the fact that Mateo takes a hit from the bong because he feels disconnected from his friends. They start talking about heterosexual sex, and he looks defeated, and he takes a hit from the bong. And then throughout the season, we see him looking tired and showing other signs of depression and anxiety and isolating himself and wanting to just escape from things and not really being an active participant in his life. In every single clip in this episode, we see him abusing weed and using weed as a coping mechanism. And then he goes to his dealer to get pills. Do you see how that's completely different? And how in the OG, yes, I do think it is believable and probably like a good thing that Isak is pretty easily persuaded by the doctor and inspired by the doctor to open up to Jonas and to, start building bridges to people, right? But here, I don't think it's that simple. And I do think it is irresponsible of Druck to just have this conversation and think that it's the same as what the OG did. Mateo doesn't go to his dealer for the same reason that Isak went to the doctor. There isn't a deep issue there with Isak like there is for Mateo. It feels like they're shooting themselves in the foot a little bit here by having Reindeer say, you know, if you keep going like this, other things are going to become your friends. They're acknowledging that Mateo has a predisposition to abuse drugs as a coping mechanism, which is something that Isaac does not have, once again. So they're acknowledging it here, but then they're also expecting us to just drop it after this clip and expecting us to just think that this clip is enough to kind of scare Mateo straight. I would love to hear what other people think about this clip because, yes, I love this episode, but I think it also brings up some really big issues with this season. My biggest issue with this season is the way that they just kind of drop the evidence that they've placed for Mateo having a deeper mental illness and for Mateo having a drug problem. They're the ones who placed it. They're the ones who put it in there from the very first clip. And now they're just kind of backing away from it and kind of copping out a little bit, I think. I'd love to hear what y'all think about this. So the first thing he does once he is inspired by Reindeer's speech is to contact Jonas, of course, his best friend. Jonas is the first person that he wants to see and that he wants to reconcile with. So we have another drawing from David. This is the second one. The first thing I want to say about this is that I think it is incredibly important that Mateo only gets this. If nothing else, it's at least a little bit of a reassurance that David doesn't hate him and that it's not all bad. But he only gets it after he contacts Jonas. And I think that's a great way for Druck to show that what is important is Mateo building bridges to people, Mateo opening up and learning to be active and not just run away from everything. And I also like the idea of it being a physical message. I know that this was set up, obviously. In episode 5, he also left a physical drawing for him. But I just like that it's a contrast from the last message he sent to Mateo, which was on his phone, and it was very impersonal, and it was also a lie. It was just a way for David to escape and to run away, and it was all very panicked, and it wasn't how he actually felt. But this is personal. He took the time to draw it. He took the time to deliver it. It's physical. It's something that Mateo can actually have. And I think that really is a cool way to show that this is what David actually means. This is honest. He actually means that Mateo didn't do anything wrong, and he wants Mateo to know that and to internalize that. He doesn't want Mateo to internalize that text message. He doesn't. So there's another blunt transition. I talked about there being one of those in the last part between clips 4 and 5. And they also use trains there as well. And I think they're used in the exact same way here. I think that train racing by and the sudden cut from darkness to this very light and bright shot with the loud train noise, I think it definitely symbolizes how Mateo's mind is like racing right now. And there is a bit of panic and definitely nervousness because he's about to come out to Jonas. I think you can definitely see that there is nervousness because we see him looking at this poster that seems to be, I guess, promoting heterosexuality, as if we need that ever. Yeah, you can totally tell that he's nervous. We didn't even need the train symbolism to see that. I think Jonas's actor does an incredible job here. They both do an incredible job here. But I really love the way that Jonas looks at Mateo throughout this entire clip. It's very delicate. It's protective and it's kind and it's just so warm. He really just wants to make sure that Mateo is okay. I was on his ass earlier in the season for not accepting that something was wrong with Mateo, but I do understand it. I do. It's realistic. It makes sense. The people you're closest to sometimes have the hardest time accepting that something is actually wrong. But now that he's accepted it and now that it is in his face and he can't ignore it, he is all the way ready to help Mateo at any cost. So I really love that. I love their dynamic. You can definitely tell that Jonas thinks of Matteo as like a little brother, and he's very protective of him in that way. I don't think I can say enough how much I adore how this conversation begins. Jonas starts it by saying that his life got so much better once he stopped smoking so much. It's obviously an anecdote because he's trying to help Matteo and because he's trying to offer Matteo some advice. He's indirectly telling Matteo, hey, you should probably stop smoking so much. It helped me. It'll help you too. I know it will. You'll feel so much better. And this is a similar thing to what Carlos did in clip 2 as well, when he mentioned the spa and pretty much looked at Matteo and said, you know, if you want to relax, spa is the way to go. And I just love that. It's such a sweet, implicit way to offer Matteo some help and to just let him know he's there for him. And I think it's also a way to just start the conversation. I think Jonas knows Matteo well enough to know that it's not easy for him to open up to people. So Jonas, he starts it out, and he talks about something that's really important. He makes it personal, but he knows that it's actually about Matteo, and it's actually to help Matteo. And I think this once again is another way that Druck is obviously telling us that Matteo has a drug problem, and then also just sweeping it kind of under the rug. It's close. It's so close, right? Because all of the signs are there, and I think it's set up so well. It's set up in the very first clip, and it culminates in this episode. And it's also a nice parallel because in the last season, Jonas was the one who was struggling with drugs. And now it's the opposite, and now Jonas has the wisdom to kind of help Matteo here. So it's all set up, and it's all done really well until you realize that after this, no one mentions it again. And you realize that Matteo never actually gets like professional help for this. Neither does Jonas, but Jonas probably doesn't have like deeper mental issues either. So Druck, you almost got there. You really almost got there. And then you just kind of tripped a little bit. You really did. I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm going to talk about this when I kind of wrap up the season in the last episode, but I can't ignore it here because this is literally the episode where we see Matteo abusing drugs the most, and all of those mental health issues that I've been mentioning throughout the season so far culminate here. And it just kind of bothers me that it never really gets wrapped up in a concrete way, and this is kind of the end of it, because after this we have an episode of Matteo doing self-care, and then we have David's story for the last 3 episodes. And we never circle back to Matteo's underlying mental health issues. So I have to mention it here because where else am I going to mention it? Because Druck seems like they forget about it. I'm not going to forget about it. Okay, moving on. So sorry. So not only is Jonas just like very good at giving Matteo room to talk and opening up the conversation because he knows Matteo isn't going to do it, I think he's also good at balancing humor and seriousness in this conversation as well. I believe that they've been friends for years. I believe that they're best friends because of that dynamic, because it just seems like Jonas knows how to, I don't want to say handle Matteo, but he just knows how to approach this. And it seems just like second nature to him. He knows Matteo. I love that you can hear birds squawking there.
Das ist richtig schön und
I think David is connected to birds. I think there is a connection there. I think he feels a connection there because he makes art surrounding birds. I can imagine him really liking them because they can fly away whenever they want to and they have the freedom to escape. It was probably just a coincidence, like they're literally outside and there's probably birds just there and they can't do anything about that. But I think it is perfect. I think it ended up being really perfect that the birds started squawking right when he starts talking about David, because there is that connection there. So I talked about in the last part how in the conversation with Hannah, when she asks what's going on with him, the camera cuts to a much closer shot of Matteo. But he says, I don't know. He doesn't open up. He is going to and he wants to, and you can see that he wants to, and he gets close to tears, and Matteo pulls back, and the camera cuts to a wide shot to show that there's that distance there. And then in the next clip, there is finally a push-in on Mateo. There is a slow, intimate push-in when he's looking at the pictures. You think that maybe he's gonna let himself feel what he needs to feel and let himself accept that he needs some help and that he needs to not be alone. But then it also does the same thing, and it suddenly just cuts to another wide shot, and we're left distanced from Mateo again. But here, they push in on Mateo as he's talking about how it's beautiful and perfect with David. And then it lets us sit there. Even though it does cut back to Jonas in between, there isn't a sudden jump back to the wide shot, if that makes sense. It pushes in and then it stays. We're allowed to be close to Mateo here. He's finally opening up. He's finally letting himself say all of this. We are finally close to Mateo. He is finally close to himself, and he's also letting Jonas in on that as well. His voice is so soft and so sweet. It cracks definitely when he says that it was really beautiful.
Das war richtig schön. So einfach. Wir haben uns richtig gut verstanden. Und dann.
There's just so much love there. He's such a sap. He's so sappy, and I love it. I really do think Mateo is such a loving person. I think he has a lot of love to give, and I think he feels things very strongly, and you can absolutely see that here, and you can hear it here. It sounds like he's about to cry, genuinely. And then it does cut to the wide here, but not because Mateo has pulled back. It doesn't cut to the wide and give us that distance because Mateo is distancing himself. It cuts to the wide because Mateo is done talking. He has said what he needs to say, and now Jonas is gonna kind of lighten the mood a little bit and inject some humor into this. But then, like I said, he does balance that humor with the seriousness of, we got this. And I think the "we got this" is really interesting. I love that wording. It seems so simple, and it is simple, right? It is a super simple thing to say, but I think it does just mean so much. Jonas is making sure to emphasize that Mateo knows he is not alone, which is a direct contrast to the beginning of this episode, where Mateo was alone and he was in his super dark and disgusting room and it was just very, very somber and scary and disorienting. But now Mateo knows that he is not alone anymore. He has built his first bridge. He has opened up to his best friend. Everything isn't perfect. There's still shit going on with David. He still doesn't know what's going on with him. But this is Druck once again hitting home that this is what the season is about. This is the important development of this episode. It is Mateo learning to communicate. This season is about Mateo building bridges to other people and to himself, not just him falling in love with David. And I also love the use of the pronoun we there. I mentioned it in episode 3 when they're looking at the dancing girls and Mateo says some homophobic shit about the dancing teacher. Jonas says, since when do we insult gay people as a collective, us as the group? At that point, Mateo probably didn't feel connected to that pronoun at all because he didn't feel a part of the group. He felt very disconnected. But now Jonas says we, and I really do think that Mateo believes him. As a stark contrast to that moment, Mateo actually feels included in Jonas saying we. It's such a peaceful ending shot. And it holds for a little bit longer than you expect it to. It really gives you a chance to just kind of sit with it and kind of take a breath, which is really nice. There's nature there. It's a very wide shot. There's so much room to breathe and to just take it in. Very different from how this episode started. It was all very cramped and there was literally that spin that was so disorienting. It was dark and drab. This is completely different. Mateo is finally going to start to get better. Things are looking up for him. He isn't confined or stuck anymore. And that is because he has let people in. Okay, that is finally it for episode 6. I already miss it. I hope y'all enjoyed this one as much as I did, and I will see you for episode 7. Thank you so much for watching.